Well, today we have Trudeau being questioned by Pierre, and This Week in Politics. Check it out.
Bottom line, so what we know is that vaccines work, and that's why we introduced Alberta's Restrictions Exemption Program, or Proof of Vaccination System, on September the 15th. And today, we are announcing new supports for eligible businesses who choose to participate in the Restrictions Exemption Program. First, we're announcing that we'll soon be offering a one-time payment of $2,000 to Alberta's small and medium-sized businesses who are eligible to or who choose to implement this program to help with them with some of the fixed costs associated with it. Minister Schweitzer will have more to say on the new REP implementation grant shortly. This funding is designed to help offset the cost of implementing the Restrictions Exemption Program, but eligible businesses will be able to use this funding flexibly in the way that they see fit. There will also be an additional $1 million available for training to support the safety of workers when implementing Alberta's Restriction Exemption Program. And we'll be building on the ProServe program that has long existed to help licensed hospitality businesses. Eligible industry associations across Alberta can use the new REP training grant to develop or procure training to support workers to assess and manage challenging situations that may arise during their daily work. Workers and employees will be able to access this training through select industry associations, which Minister Schweitzer will outline in just a moment. And finally, to support businesses implementing Alberta's Restrictions Exemption Program, we'll provide legislation to protect businesses who require vaccinations for employees or who implement the program from legal challenges, and to protect workers on the front line from harassment and mistreatment. We will be doubling the maximum fine for mistreating public-facing workers from $2,000 to $4,000. The bottom line is this: vaccines are essential to avoid a collapse in our healthcare system and even more preventable deaths. And we're doing everything we can to get as many Albertans vaccinated as possible.
Well, we have the NDP. They've been busy as heck. And then we have the Ontario. They're giving up Maxi pads. I thought it was like, what is this? Hilarious at first. But actually, you know, he has a good point. So
the system, and it's bad.
Here.
But I think something that really drives home how bad this is each one of those examples of cheating the system isn't just wrong because it's cheating the system. It means that was the hospital that a community needed that is gone. That was the funding for frontline healthcare workers who are right now struggling in this pandemic. That was the funding necessary to make sure we had clean drinking water for Indigenous people. That's the funding or the resources necessary to bring in pharmacare for all. It's the direct impact on people. Each one of those examples of billions of dollars being lost means that people don't get the help they need. They don't get the pharmacare. They don't get childcare. They don't get hospitals and infrastructure that we could be investing in. And that's why it matters. It's because that's the resources that people miss out on. Don't get...
mislead people for some other purpose.
Damn right, there's a lot of misleading going on, and I think said person is one of them. What do you think? Leave your comments below. Check
to improve our schools. Today, we're taking another very positive step forward, supporting the health and safety of students. Menstrual products are, of course, a necessity, not a luxury. For women and girls, ensuring that they have access to these products is key for their health and successful participation within school. But the reality is that some students cannot afford or access them, and this creates barriers. Yesterday, I was fortunate to speak with Keith, the president of the Ontario Student Trustee Association. Keith and his team of young leaders have been incredibly strong advocates to end period poverty in this province, to take action to help address this very real equity issue. And we spoke about a young girl who told him that she did not go to school for several days because she could not afford a menstrual product.
Well, here we have the Bank of Canada. He spoke this week. Check it out.
Some of that wouldn't be a bad thing. With respect to different types of workers, I mean, one of the things that has been really striking about this COVID crisis is how uneven the labor market impacts have been. And the women, youth, recent immigrants, and low-wage workers have been disproportionately affected by this crisis. As I mentioned earlier, as important parts of the economy, particularly the hard-hit sectors where physical distancing is important, as those have managed to reopen, we are starting to see this unevenness diminish. In particular, over the summer in Canada, we saw, youth came back into the labor market in a very dramatic way, and really, youth had been very severely affected. That has diminished. However, low-income workers still remain much more disproportionately affected by this pandemic than others. If you just, in Canada, if you separate workers into low-wage workers and everybody else is now back above their pre-pandemic level of employment. Low-wage workers are still well below. So the first step is to get those people back to work. Get them back, remake those connections, get them back into the labor force, get them back into a job, and restore their income. With respect to wages, from the central bank's point of view, what we aim to do is provide an overall anchor for the system. There may be a need for some relative wage adjustments, as you suggested, and you want to see those relative wage adjustments in your economy. What you have to make sure, though, is that wages overall remain in line, wage growth overall remains in line roughly with productivity growth, and so that inflation remains roughly in line with the target. So that's how we think about it. But it's not a simple question.
Boy, here's a blast in the past. I couldn't believe that Justin Trudeau actually went to get grilled by Pierre Poilievre. I think he was so confident that he could convince Canadians, but he didn't.
Poilievre,
Check it out.
6 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Prime Minister. What is the total dollar value of all of the expenses reimbursed, fees paid to, and any other consideration provided by the we group to you, your mother, your spouse, your brother, and any other member of your family? Just the total, please.
Minister.
Sorry, mute. I don't have that exact figure. Reimbursing expenses is something done by an organization, for example, so I don't have those totals.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Yeah, what's your point of
Chair,
order?
sorry, no, Mr. Speaker. My point of order is, what's the relevance of these questions of ancillary fees paid to family members to the official motion that you
I don't think that is a point of order, Ms. Zerwitz. Back to Mr. Poilievre.
So you're telling me that you don't know how much immediate family members have been paid in expense reimbursements by this organization?
My mother and my brother are professionals in their own right who have engagements and have for many, many years with many different organizations across the country. And I don't have the details of their work experiences or their expenses.
And what about your spouse? What is the dollar figure?
I think We Charity has been able to share those dollar figures with you.
When was the last time she had an expense reimbursed by We Charity?
I believe it would have been for the trip to London where she spoke at We, but those expenses were cleared in advance by the Ethics Commission.
And how much was it?
Mr. Poilievre.
How much were those expenses?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Mr. Prime Minister, it's very hard to believe you don't have that number. You've been embroiled in this scandal now for over a month, and these kinds of questions have been asked repeatedly. I asked it to you in the House of Commons weeks ago. You've had time to get it, so I'll ask again. How much was your spouse reimbursed by We for her recent trip to London?
Okay, to take an example, for a plane ticket that was booked for her flight to London, it wasn't something that she would have paid for to be reimbursed by
what about a hotel?
Charity. The We Charity would have actually paid for that ticket themselves, so we wouldn't have those answers on our credit cards, for example.
So you don't have any idea how much the We Charity paid for your spouse to travel to London?
Over the past number of months, I've been involved in serving Canadians and focused on that. But I know that the We Charity themselves have shared those expenses, and
they have not.
you had the opportunity to talk to them.
They have not shared those expenses, Prime Minister. They have refused to tell us the itemized expense for that trip, and they didn't even confirm she was on that trip. What hotel did they pay for her to stay at?
I don't know.
Okay. This would have been a very expensive trip, and it would have been paid for in March. Your government then, a month later, was amassing a program of $500 million, which you now admit you helped approve a month after that. How could you possibly have believed that it was appropriate for you to approve a nearly $500 million grant to a group that only 60 days earlier was paying for sumptuous travels for immediate members of your family?
Mr. Prime Minister. The Ethics Commissioner fully cleared Sophie's volunteer unpaid work with We, whether it's for her podcast or her appearance at We events or her work as a We ambassador and ally. It was all entirely unpaid, but they reimbursed expenses, and that was clearance that was gotten in advance by the Ethics Commissioner.
And did you tell the Ethics
Commissioner? Mr. Poilievre, we're on equal time here, and the Prime Minister still has time. Go ahead, Prime Minister.
Obviously, that was not a concern for me, knowing that the Ethics Commissioner had approved of Sophie volunteering her time and having expenses covered for engagements with this.
And when you became involved with the decision to approve the $500 million grant to We Charity on May the 5th, did you then immediately inform the Ethics Commissioner that you were doing that, and and also inform the Ethics Commissioner that this group was paying expenses for your spouse?
As I said, the Ethics Commissioner already knew because he had approved Sophie volunteering with the We organization a long time ago. And secondly, my knowledge of We being involved in delivering this program only happened on May 8th, not on May 5th, as you are saying.
On May 8th, did you contact the Ethics Commissioner to seek permission to be part of the decision to approve this $500 million grant? Yes or no?
On May 8th, I received the formal recommendation by the Public Service that they go ahead with the We program, that they go ahead with the We program to deliver it. And I pulled it back from Cabinet and asked them to do further due diligence because I knew there would be questions.
I'm sorry, Prime Minister, back to Mr. Poilievre.
Time remaining?
You have about 68 seconds.
Mr. Prime Minister, you admit now that you should have removed yourself from the decision to grant this $500 million grant to the We Charity. You were found guilty of taking a free vacation from someone who sought a $15 million grant from you. Strike one. You were found guilty of interfering with the criminal prosecution of a Liberal Link corporation. Strike
Chair,
two.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Mr. Sabera?
The MP Poilievre has brought up some points that are not of relevance to this committee and the motion put forth.
I am going to allow the question, but Mr. Poilievre, please leave time for the answer in your 6 minutes as well. Go ahead.
Thank you. You were twice found guilty of breaking the Ethics Act before, strikes 1 and 2, and now you admit a third strike by your failure to recuse yourself, and in the process you broke the Ethics Act a third time. What happens in baseball when you have 3 strikes?
That's the end of the your round, Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Prime Minister, you have about 30 seconds to respond.
As I said to Canadians a number of weeks ago, I should have recused myself, knowing the connections between my family and the perceptions around this issue. However, I did not intervene to make this recommendation happen. When the recommendation came forward from the Public Service, I sent it back to the Public Service to say, you really need to make sure that this is indeed the only organization that can deliver this program and that this is done exactly the right way. because there is going to be careful scrutiny on this. At that point, instead, I should have recused myself, but I didn't.
Welcome to Safe Space Cafe. News, music, and comedy.